Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. So actually Dungeons and Dragons 5e, but actually I have a guest with me who's going to talk specifically about how to run Dungeons and Dragons or play Dungeons and Dragons with kids. That's Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Hi, Sadie.
Hello, I'm Sadie Rogers. I'm in Chicago, and I do run Dungeons and Dragons online for kids ages 9 to 14 primarily, but have also been recently delving into running it for much younger kids, ages 5 to 8. And I have lots of exciting things to share with you that may kind of demystify that.
The character sheet. Now, the character sheet for me is pretty complicated, and I recently tried to run a game for people who have head injuries, mental illness, really can't function at a high level. I wouldn't say they're kids, but adults with those sorts of propensities. What do you do with the character sheet for Dungeons and Dragons 5e? Because it looks pretty complicated. I would imagine it's pretty hard for kids to deal with.
I created a simplified version of the character sheet specifically geared towards my younger kids recently. And I honestly wish I had done it a long time ago. When you're dealing with preteens, it's fine to hand them the 5e character sheet. It's awesome. But with the younger kids, I take away the skills, take away the hit dice, take away the temporary hit points, take a lot of stuff away and give the centralization, the main aspect of the character sheet. What do you look like? Draw yourself. Put it right in the middle. Draw yourself. Before we start playing, draw what your weapons look like, where they hang on your body, where your little bags are and everything. What is your character type? I'm taking away race and class and just saying, what type are you? What are you? Describe it in your own words. Gold and jewels, a section for weapons, a section for magic and potions. And then they do still keep at the bottom languages, tools, and gear. And then they do still keep those 6 scores. So I do still stick with strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. I use the tomato rule to describe it to kids. Strength is the ability to throw a tomato. Dexterity is the ability to dodge out of the way of a tomato being thrown at you. Constitution is the ability to not get sick if you eat a bad tomato. Intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. And wisdom is knowing that you shouldn't put a tomato in a fruit salad. And charisma is the ability to sell a fruit salad to a stranger that has tomatoes in it.
Now, I don't like alignment in the game as it is, and I usually just consider it something that describes the character rather than predisposes the character to doing something. But do you worry about alignment on the character sheet?
I did worry about alignment with kids at first, and I have learned that it just doesn't matter. If there's one thing in D&D that I'm not a big fan of alignment, you know this, we've talked about this. I think no human is one set way. I think we ebb and we flow with the situations around us and the people we meet. But with little kids, I just kind of leave it off. I do ask them, what are you like? Would you steal? Did you have, I might talk to them about what their background is. With older kids, I usually I will show them the alignment chart and still let them talk about alignment. But even with the older kids, they talk about how they don't want to be pinned down by that. Life is situational, and crazy extreme stuff is happening to you in these games. So of course you might been raised lawful and end up, doing something very breaking the law in a very clear way. I frankly, as a player, and shouldn't say this on the internet, but I hate it when players are like, well, you're alignment, you shouldn't do that because if you're alignment or you're blah blah blah, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, I don't like a table where somebody's doing that at me as a player, and I don't want my kids doing that to each other. And when I catch them doing that, I'm like, hey, people change. People change.
It doesn't sound like you have the personality traits, the ideals, bonds, or flaws on the character sheet for the younger generations, like 5 to 8. Like, are you doing that because they don't need it or because it's too complicated? I mean,
When I ask them to describe their characters in combat so I can determine what they're going to be, I also have a conversation at some point about it's kind of like what you would ask an actor when they're delving into a character. I ask, what does your ranger do on their day off? What kind of books do they read? What do they practice? Who do they meet with? And that kind of stuff. And I get them to talk to me about their background and maybe even write it out. But I leave that stuff off and I place their descriptions kind of in place of that. Some of them will actually, if they're like older, they might write me a little blurb about who they are. I've even been sent videos where the kids will record themselves talking about where their character comes from, and I can take that and kind of like weave it into the story a little bit. But yeah, I leave that off for sure. I don't need all of that with the younger kids. I still use that with the older kids.
What about feats? I mean, do you use feats in multi-classing when you're running games for kids, whether that be the 5 to 8 or the 9 to 12?
I do not worry about feats with the younger kids at all. They don't, if they stick with the game and they're playing with for a while, I might introduce some stuff like that as I slowly introduce things like proficiency and all of that as time goes on. But with the older kids, I absolutely keep all of that in there. Look, these 9 to 14-year-olds can read a PHB in one night, and they know all the feats, and they want to do Tavern Brawler or they want to do Linguist. They get so excited about that stuff. So give them all the options. They also have the internet at their fingertips, and they're on there a lot more than adults are because they're kids. So they might actually come to you with things that you don't know about. That's certainly happened to me. You want to give them all of the options and then even allow them to homebrew options. I allow kids 9 to 14 specifically to homebrew weapons. I allow them to homebrew feats. I allow them to homebrew backgrounds for sure. And I say, like, describe where you came from. If it's not one of the options we can find somewhere, I'll be like, okay, let's give you a proficiency bump on this and this because that makes sense and that kind of thing. Kids will go nuts with weapons. Like, I had one that made a dagger from an ice drake recently. We had the weapon basically be slightly dangerous. So he helped me lay out that each time it hit, we rolled a d8 and there were 8 different things that could happen. Kind of like wild magic, but they were specifically damage based, with 7 being in favor of the player and 1 be backfiring, right? And with the ice drake knife, it was really fun with that dagger because we made it all ice based things. And then I have another kid who has a cartoon hammer that's very like cartoon-esque and does instead of like Thor's hammer thing, it does like very Cartoon Networky looking things. And then I have kids with magic arrows. Take the time and homebrew with them and let them get creative with you. But yeah, feats are awesome for preteens and definitely too much for little kids.
This has been a great conversation, Sadie. So thank you very much. So where can people find you, Sadie?
I am available on Instagram at Sad Pigs. That's SADPIGS. And I am also working on a film about some adults playing D&D that is in early development called Heart of the Trepid, and it's on Instagram at Heart of the Trepid. That's TREPID. My YouTube is Sadie and Valinor, and I'm kind of all over the internet. So come find me, ask me any questions, hit me up anytime. I'm around. Thank you.
So I'm going to put all of those links, or as many as I can, down in the description so you can find those. Thank you, Sadie, for being on. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.